Intervention biases describe different ways that an experiment might have problems with the intervention, that the intervention may not be provided faithfully, or that some other factor may interfere with the effectiveness of the intervention being tested. Contamination refers to a very specific kind of problem. If, if participants in the control group receive the intervention that you're testing, that's contamination. So if you're testing a mindfulness treatment and the people in the control group find out what the mindfulness treatment is and do it on their own, that's contamination. And what you want to look for are things like treatment fidelity, so that they're measuring what each group does, and isolated groups, so that they're actually keeping the groups apart so that one group can't figure out what the other group is doing. Co-intervention is like contamination, except it's every other kind of intervention. So if you're doing a study on weight training and some of the participants take up another form of exercise, that is a kind of co-intervention. So things you're looking for are inclusion-exclusion criteria. So they may exclude people that are already involved in some other exercise group. Random group allocation, the idea being that some co-intervention is inevitable, but spreading out people randomly is going to balance out that effect. Stratified randomization. So if you can break people up based on some factor, like their medications that they're taking, that's a way to accommodate this. And matching, if you've really got to assign people to groups so that you know there's someone in each group getting the same medicine, going to the same treatment, whatever it is. Timing bias refers to when the intervention was applied. So was it applied too soon, so before it could work, or too late after it could work? This is an issue in things like studies of stroke, when there's a certain level of plasticity associated with the first few weeks or months after a stroke, when some treatments are potentially more effective than later on. And there you're looking for treatment fidelity. Chronological bias, these are events that happen just because of the passage of time. So if an intervention happens over the course of 6 months or a year, is aging or maturation going to be a problem? So for studies of young kids, right? So a year is a long time in the life of a 5-year-old. So you need to consider that when you're looking at, did my intervention cause a change in this child? Similarly, if the intervention happens over a really short time, was that enough time for that intervention to actually make a difference? And then there are also issues with when the intervention occurs in terms of season, right? If you're doing a study on the benefits of a walking intervention and you do it in the middle of winter, then it's probably going to be not nearly as effective as if you did that intervention in the middle of the summer. Proficiency bias refers to what the qualifications of the clinician that's providing the intervention and the site where the intervention was held. So if you're comparing two interventions and one therapist is really well trained and experienced, and the other is very new, that may bias the treatment, may bias the results towards the treatment being delivered by the experienced therapist. If you've got one site with lots of resources and a second clinical site that doesn't have those resources, that may bias the results. This can also be an issue when people are doing things at home, right? So in these cases, they're their own therapist and their home is the site. Are there differences between these locations that are going to affect the results? On the flip side of this is if there's only one therapist and one site, if it's that tightly controlled, will the results generalize beyond that single therapist and that single site? The Hawthorne Effect refers to this idea that participants sometimes change their behavior because they're being watched. So you might have an intervention that you're testing, and just because you're paying attention to the people who are getting that intervention and you're meeting with them and you're asking them how they're doing, they may change their behavior, or that may in itself improve the results of the intervention. So what you want to see is an active control group. So another group of people that isn't just being sent home with nothing to do and getting no attention, but maybe meeting with the clinicians and getting some sort of alternative treatment or getting some sort of educational intervention, but they're getting some attention from the clinicians. A concern for external validity is the interaction of the treatment and the setting. So it may be that for a particular kind of intervention, the location, the environment, the person who was delivering it might be a critical part of its success. And that's a concern for external validity, right? So yes, these people in this environment were able to get positive results. Will it work for other people and other environments? And there, you're really looking for replication. Can other people repeat this? Have other people repeated these results? And then interaction of treatment and history. Was the study you're reading done in a different, dissimilar time period? So was it done long enough ago that those results don't necessarily apply? So if you're studying technology, for example, a study that involved smartphones or cell phones from 10 or 15 years ago is using very different technology than studies that would be done more recently. And again, this is an issue of external validity. So yes, they got these results at this time period. Will you get similar results now? And there you're looking for replication again. Have other people recently replicated these results?